Dimension by Elton Thomas, chapters 1 through 10. Chapter 1. Dr. Kobe's Physics Class. Cole Noble sat toward the middle of Dr. Kobe's physics class, his hands folded loosely on his notebook, his gaze fixed on the blackboard. It was his senior year, and though Tremble High was not particularly known for its academic rigor, Dr. Kobe's physics classes were something of a hidden treasure. Today, the classroom buzzed softly with anticipation, the kind that only Dr. Kobe could inspire. His lessons often ventured into territories that felt half myth, half science, and today was no exception. Dr. Kobe stood at the front of the class, a wiry man in his 60s with silvered hair that never seemed entirely combed, a crisp white shirt, and a tie that somehow stayed impeccably in place despite his animated movements. He had an energy that betrayed his age, an enthusiasm that seemed to pour out of him in waves as he began speaking, his voice carrying a slight rasp yet full of warmth. "Electrons," he said as he raised a hand, letting his fingers curl as if he were holding something delicate, something invisible, "are not as stable as they might appear in your typical diagrams. They aren't just circling the nucleus of an atom like the Earth orbits the Sun. They do something much stranger." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, letting his words settle. Cole felt himself lean forward, his eyes widening slightly, his body attuned to each word. Around him, he could sense the mixture of curiosity and half-boredom from his classmates, some of whom were doodling in their notebooks or glancing at their phones. But Cole was captured, held in the space between Dr. Kobe's words, as if they were lines to a song he'd only half heard before but somehow recognized. Dr. Kobe's voice lowered as he began pacing slowly across the front of the room. "Electrons. They blink in and out of existence. Imagine that. One moment, they're here in our world, the next, somewhere else, some place we don't quite understand." He stopped, turning to the class with a glint in his eye. "We call this quantum superposition. It's not merely that they move or disappear. No, it's that they're existing in two places, two realities, at the same time." The room was quiet, and Cole could feel his pulse quicken. He caught himself gripping his pen too tightly, his knuckles pale against the black plastic. The very idea seemed impossible and yet profoundly enticing. For as long as he could remember, Cole had been drawn to mysteries, the kind that felt just out of reach, like a language he could almost understand if he just listened hard enough. Dr. Kobe walked over to the large, smudged blackboard, picking up a piece of chalk, then turned, his face breaking into a faint, mischievous smile. "What's more," he continued, "the concept doesn't end at electrons. In fact, physicists have long speculated that entire worlds might blink in and out, just like these particles, parallel worlds that we can't see or touch, but which exist somehow alongside ours." His chalk tapped against the board as he began to draw two circles side by side, with a small line bridging them, a simple sketch of two worlds on a collision course. The image struck something within Cole. It felt almost like déjà vu, as if he were seeing a truth he'd always known but had never been able to articulate. He let his shoulders relax and leaned back in his seat, his mind spinning with possibilities. His gaze flicked to the window, where sunlight streamed through, casting a warm glow that caught the faint chalk dust hanging in the air. Outside, students ambled past in lazy groups, and he wondered if any of them were even aware of the mind-bending realities Dr. Kobe was describing. Dr. Kobe's voice softened, pulling Cole's attention back. "We can't perceive these worlds directly," he said. "They might be right beside us, the faintest breath away, and we would have no idea. But," he paused, his eyes brightening, "if something, or someone, were able to bridge that gap, to see or even step into these parallel worlds, what would they find?" Cole's mind raced as he absorbed this. The room felt suddenly alive with invisible energy, a strange electric charge that made the air feel thick. He glanced at his notebook, where he had absent-mindedly written the word existence in looping letters, each E stretching further than the last. From his seat in the back, a student named Darren raised his hand, his voice dripping with his usual sarcasm. "So, you're saying there's like another me out there right now doing exactly what I'm doing?" Dr. Kobe chuckled, shaking his head. "Not quite, Darren. You see, in these alternate dimensions, things might mirror our reality in some ways, but diverge drastically in others. These worlds could operate on entirely different rules, with different people, different histories, different physics altogether." Cole's fingers tapped restlessly against his notebook, his attention glued to Dr. Kobe. There was something in his expression, a quiet thrill, as if he were on the verge of sharing a profound secret, yet restrained by the boundaries of what science could explain. One of the students next to Cole nudged his friend, whispering something about crazy old Kobe. They chuckled softly, but Cole didn't hear them. He was already lost, immersed in the vision of a world not so different from his own, yet altered in inexplicable, alluring ways. The idea of a dimension existing beside theirs, one where life unfolded with the same certainty, yet with different outcomes, filled him with a yearning he couldn't quite name. It was like an itch beneath the surface of his mind, something he wanted desperately to scratch. Dr. Kobe, as if sensing the fervour he'd ignited in some of his students, smiled wistfully. "It's natural to doubt these ideas. They sound like something from science fiction. But," he continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "consider this. If our world operates on principles that are only just beginning to make sense to us, who's to say what other worlds might operate on?" He turned back to the blackboard, drawing an arrow from one circle to the other, then stepped back to admire his handiwork. A slight smile lingered on his lips, as though he were savouring some unseen connection, a bridge spanning the gap between his imagination and his knowledge. "Perhaps one day we'll understand, and perhaps one day, one of you will be the one to find out." A shiver ran through Cole, the sensation prickling along his arms and spine. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to believe that he could be that someone, that he could be the one to uncover what lay hidden in the spaces between reality, in the blinks of existence that even electrons seem to obey. Dr. Kobe set down the chalk and turned to face the class. "Now, I want you all to let that sink in," he said. "Imagine the possibility, just for a moment, that every choice you make is being mirrored, split, or even reshaped in a place we cannot reach, somewhere just out of sight." As the bell rang, the spell broke and students began gathering their things, shuffling out of the room with chatter and laughter. But Cole stayed in his seat a moment longer, his mind still racing, the wheels of his thoughts turning faster than he could grasp. Finally, he rose, tucking his notebook under his arm. Dr. Kobe was erasing the blackboard, his movements slower, more deliberate, and for a fleeting second, Cole wondered if he could somehow ask him more. But the question felt too immense, too unformed to voice just yet. So, with a nod to his teacher, he slipped out of the classroom, stepping into the hallway with a lingering sense of wonder. The world around him felt slightly altered, the mundane now laced with a strange beauty, as if the edges of reality had softened, just enough for him to catch a glimpse of something beyond. Cole walked through the crowded hallway, a faint smile playing on his lips, his mind already returning to the possibilities that lay beyond the visible. Dr. Kobe's words echoed in his mind, and though he didn't know it yet, they had ignited a spark that would lead him down a path few could ever dream of. Chapter 2. Meet the Nobles. Cole closed the door behind him as he entered his house, breathing in the familiar scent of lemon and lavender from his mom's essential oils diffuser. The house felt lively and warm, like the first breath of spring after a long winter, the hum of daily life filling every corner. The faint murmur of his mother's music drifted from the kitchen, the strains of some upbeat pop song he could never quite identify, and a burst of laughter floated down the hallway from his sister Suzi's room. "Mom, I'm home," he called out, setting his backpack down by the door. Mary Noble's voice echoed from the kitchen. "In here, honey. I'm finishing up dinner. How was school?" Cole made his way down the hallway, his fingers grazing along the wall, tracing the family photos that had accumulated over the years. He passed snapshots of summer vacations, his first day of school, and a particularly embarrassing Halloween costume from third grade that Suzi never let him forget. His footsteps felt lighter here, in the place that had always been his anchor, grounding him even when his thoughts wandered to distant worlds and unsolved mysteries. The kitchen was a cheerful mess, as usual. The countertops were cluttered with pots, pans, and a half-diced pile of onions that Mary was carefully chopping. She moved with an energy that was almost contagious, a slight bounce in her step as she wielded the knife with precise, practiced cuts. Her light brown hair was tied up in a loose bun, and a sprinkle of flour dusted her cheek. Despite the chaos of dinner prep, she looked at home, content, her face radiating warmth. Cole leaned against the counter, watching her. "It was interesting," he said, an amused smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Interesting, huh?" Mary raised an eyebrow, glancing at him with a look that said she knew he was holding something back. "With Dr. Kobe, I bet. He's a fascinating man, always talking about things that sound impossible." "Yeah," Cole replied, still mulling over Doctor. Kobe's words about electrons and parallel worlds. It was mind-bending. He started talking about quantum stuff, like how particles blink in and out of existence, and it got me thinking. Mary gave him a warm, knowing smile. "Thinking? That's what I like to hear. Just don't let him blow your mind too much all at once. I need you grounded enough to help with the dishes." Cole chuckled. His mom always had a way of grounding him, gently pulling him back from the brink of his own wandering thoughts. He knew her love of science was where he got his own curiosity. She taught physics at Tremble University, and he'd grown up listening to her explanations of energy, particles, and the wonders of the cosmos. As if on cue, a loud thud sounded from the hallway, followed by an exasperated groan. "Suzi, are you okay?" Mary called out, amusement in her voice. "Yeah, just, my equipment fell over," Suzi replied, her voice muffled by the door. Cole rolled his eyes, stifling a laugh. His sister Suzi was obsessed with all things paranormal, especially ghost hunting. At 15, she was brimming with energy and enthusiasm, always chasing after the next haunted spot in town or dragging Cole into watching ghost hunting shows with her. Her room was packed with cameras, EMF detectors she'd convinced their mum to buy her as a science experiment, and other essential ghost hunting gear. Suzi's door swung open, and she appeared in the hallway, clutching an old, battered notebook with a triumphant grin. Her curly hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Cole, you'll never believe what I found." He smirked, crossing his arms. "Another haunted tree branch." "No," she shot back, her tone playful but resolute. "I was researching the history of Tremble, and I found this story about a ghost that supposedly haunts our neighborhood, right down the street. Isn't that wild?" Cole shook his head, chuckling. "You realize you say that about every other house on this block, right?" Suzi rolled her eyes but held out her notebook eagerly, flipping it open to show him a scrawled page with notes and a crude map she'd drawn. "No, seriously, this one is different. The guy who used to live there vanished mysteriously in the 1920s. People claimed they could hear him whispering at night, and his wife said he'd just blinked out of existence." Cole paused, the mention of blinking out of existence hitting a little too close to what Dr. Kobe had been talking about earlier. He cleared his throat, trying not to let his mind spiral. "Sounds spooky," he said, trying to keep his tone light. Are you planning a stakeout then? Of course. Suzi's grin widened. I've got my camera, my EVP recorder, everything, and you're coming with me. He opened his mouth to protest, but Mary interjected from the stove, her voice light but firm. Cole, why don't you go with her? She's been talking about this all week. Cole glanced between his mum and Suzi, sighing as he gave in. Fine, but I'm not holding any weird devices or chanting anything, all right? Suzi's face lit up, her excitement infectious. She grabbed his arm, practically dragging him toward her room. You won't regret it. It's going to be epic. Cole followed her reluctantly, glancing back at Mary, who gave him a wink as she returned to stirring a pot on the stove. Suzi's room was a hodgepodge of equipment, posters of classic horror movies and various books on the supernatural. It was cluttered but cosy, with strings of fairy lights casting a soft glow over everything. Her EMF detector lay on the bed, surrounded by notepads and a stack of old newspaper clippings she'd printed from the library. So, Suzi began, holding up the EMF detector like a prized artifact. This baby's going to help us detect electromagnetic fields. Ghosts give off EMF readings, you know. Cole raised an eyebrow, unable to hide his skepticism. And you're sure it's not just picking up electrical wires? Suzi grinned, unfazed. Oh, I've thought of that. I checked it already. This neighborhood's readings are different. Spooky, right? Cole smirked, amused by her absolute confidence. He watched her as she rifled through her notebooks, her excitement evident in every movement, the way her hands flew over the pages, the gleam in her eye as she rambled about haunted theories and urban legends. He'd give her credit. Suzi didn't do anything halfway. All right, he said, leaning against her bedpost. So what's the plan? Do we just, go out there and wait for something to happen? Suzi's eyes sparkled mischievously. Not just wait, Cole. We're going to find something. And when we do, it'll be proof of another realm. Imagine it. Living, breathing proof. He chuckled softly. I think Dr. Kobe might call that quantum superposition or something. She scrunched her nose, waving her hand dismissively. Dr. Kobe's cool, but science is limited, Cole. Some things can't be explained by boring equations. Sometimes you just have to trust what you feel. Her words lingered, resonating with him in a way he hadn't anticipated. It was strange, but there was a certain wisdom to her confidence. She was always the one pushing boundaries, the one who believed in the impossible, even if it was just ghosts and myths. All right, Suzi, he said, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. Lead the way. Suzi beamed, grabbing her backpack and stuffing it with her ghost-hunting essentials before slinging it over her shoulder. They made their way back down the hallway, the house feeling cozier, even warmer, as the scent of Mary's cooking filled the air. Mary glanced over her shoulder as they passed the kitchen, giving Cole a thumbs up and a wink that made him chuckle despite himself. As they stepped outside into the cool evening air, Suzi's excitement was nearly tangible, sparking off her like static electricity. Cole felt a strange calm settle over him, the chaos of the day, and Dr. Kobe's wild theories fading into the background, replaced by the simplicity of a shared adventure with his sister. The world around them felt rich and vibrant, the golden hour casting long shadows across their neighborhood. The street was quiet, with only the distant sound of someone's TV playing through an open window and the occasional bark of a dog. Cole took a deep breath, letting the cool air settle his nerves. Whatever doubts he'd harbored about the night's plans slipped away, replaced by the quiet thrill of doing something out of the ordinary, something that would make Suzi smile. Come on, Suzi whispered, her voice low, as though afraid to disturb the evening's peace. Let's go find us a ghost. Cole grinned, following her into the dimming light, his mind still echoing with Dr. Kobe's words and the excitement of his sister's relentless belief in the unknown. Chapter 3. The Camera Inheritance. Cole sat in the worn leather armchair in his grandfather's study, his hands resting on his knees, his gaze roaming over the familiar room with its warm, earthy scent of old books and polished wood. The room was filled with the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, a steady rhythm that seemed to fill the spaces left empty after his grandfather's passing. Rays of late afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow over the dust motes that drifted lazily in the air. This room, once filled with life and laughter, felt still and reverent now, as if the very walls were honouring Ben Noble's memory. It had been a simple service. His family had gathered together, each person offering their own words, sharing their own memories. Cole's mother had shared stories from her childhood, laughter mixed with tears, and Suzi, normally so lively, had sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap as she listened. Cole had remained silent, lost in his own memories of his grandfather's patience and warmth, the way Ben would ruffle his hair and call him kiddo, even as he grew taller each year. Now in the study, Cole felt an ache he couldn't quite put into words. It was as though a part of himself had been rooted in this room, tied to his grandfather's presence, and with that presence gone, he wasn't sure how to fill the space it left behind. "Cole?" His mother's voice was soft as she stepped into the study, her footsteps almost hesitant. She held something in her hands, a black rectangular case, scuffed at the edges, the kind of case that looked like it had travelled through countless years and adventures. "Mom?" he replied, his voice catching slightly. He looked at the case, then back at her, a question in his eyes. She smiled gently, her gaze tender as she extended the case toward him. "Your grandfather wanted you to have this." He took the case slowly, feeling the weight of it in his hands. The latches were cool against his fingers, and the case had a surprising heft, as if it held something more than just an ordinary item. He glanced up at his mother, but her expression remained warm and understanding. "Why did he leave it to me?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. "Your grandfather had his reasons," she replied, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You were always special to him. He knew you'd appreciate this." With a final squeeze, she left the room, leaving Cole alone with the mystery in his hands. He took a deep breath, running his fingers along the case's worn surface, feeling every scratch and dent as if each mark carried a story. The anticipation swelled within him, a faint tremor of excitement that cut through the haze of grief and loss. Carefully, he opened the latches, each one clicking softly in the stillness. He lifted the lid, and there, nestled within the faded velvet lining, lay an old high-speed camera. It was larger than most modern cameras, with a metallic body that gleamed faintly in the light, its edges softened by years of handling. The camera felt both familiar and otherworldly, as if it belonged to a different time, a different life. Cole's fingers brushed over the buttons, the dials, the faint scratches along the side where his grandfather's hands must have held it countless times. The camera lens, a dark eye, stared back at him, almost expectant, as if waiting to reveal its secrets. He lifted it from the case with a reverence he hadn't expected, feeling the weight settle into his hands, solid and real. For a moment, he simply held it, letting the reality of the inheritance sink in. His grandfather had never been one for long talks or deep explanations, but he had a way of imparting his wisdom through simple actions. Giving Cole this camera, this piece of his world, felt like his grandfather's way of passing down a legacy, a silent message that only he could understand. He raised the camera to eye level, peering through the viewfinder. The room came into sharp focus, every line and shadow captured with a clarity that felt almost surreal. The camera's build was archaic, but something about it hummed with a quiet power, as if it held a depth that went beyond its parts. Cole pressed the shutter button experimentally, and the click echoed in the room, crisp and satisfying, He lowered the camera, a faint smile playing on his lips. The curiosity grew within him, the kind that pushed him to explore, to dig deeper. His grandfather had always encouraged his curiosity, nurturing his love for science and discovery, and now, holding this camera, Cole felt that same spark come alive. He began fiddling with the settings, his fingers grazing over the dials. One dial, in particular, caught his attention. A small, slightly recessed switch near the base of the camera, worn smooth as though it had been used often. There was no label, nothing to indicate what it controlled, but something about it intrigued him. Gently, he pressed it, feeling the slight resistance before it clicked into place. The camera whirred softly, a low hum vibrating through his fingers. A thin blue light flickered along the edge of the viewfinder, casting a faint glow that pulsed in time with the hum. Cole raised an eyebrow, his pulse quickening. This was no ordinary high-speed camera, he realized. Whatever modifications his grandfather had made were far beyond the usual upgrades. "What are you hiding?" he murmured, feeling a thrill of excitement stir within him. He turned the camera over, examining every inch, looking for clues or markings that might explain its unusual design. On the underside, barely visible, was a small engraving. "To see what others cannot." The words were so faint he almost missed them, but their message settled into his mind, resonating like an echo in the silence. Cole's heart raced, his fingers tingling with anticipation. His grandfather had always been fascinated by the hidden aspects of the world, by the mysteries that lay just beyond reach. This camera, with its enigmatic modifications and that mysterious inscription, felt like an invitation, a challenge to see the world in a way no one else could. He placed the camera gently back in its case, but his gaze lingered on it, his mind already racing with possibilities. What had his grandfather meant by seeing what others cannot? Was it a poetic sentiment, or was there something more? Something real and tangible, hidden in the depths of this old machine. Cole closed the case, snapping the latches shut, but he knew that this was only the beginning. This camera held secrets, and he was determined to uncover every one of them. Chapter 4. Suzi's First Sighting. Cole was in his room, tinkering with his grandpa's camera, his fingers moving slowly over the buttons as he tried to understand its intricacies. The camera's mysteries had captivated him ever since he first held it, and the more he explored, the more he felt his curiosity deepen, like the pages of a book waiting to be opened. His mind drifted to the inscription he'd found on the bottom, "To see what others cannot." What could it mean? The camera had been oddly comforting in his hands, an extension of his curiosity, a way to connect with his grandfather's world. Lost in thought, he was suddenly jolted out of his musings by a rapid, excited knocking on his door. "Cole!" Suzi's voice was barely muffled by the door, her tone urgent and filled with an unmistakable excitement. "You have to see this!" Cole set the camera down carefully, his mind switching gears as he got up and opened the door. Suzi stood in the doorway, her cheeks flushed, eyes wide with an eagerness that Cole recognized immediately. She was holding her phone like it was a rare artifact, her grip tight, as though she was worried it might disappear if she didn't hold on tight enough. "What's going on?" he asked, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Suzi's enthusiasm was infectious, and he found himself feeling a flicker of excitement in response. I think I found something," she said, glancing down at her phone, her expression shifting between pride and disbelief. "A ghost." Cole raised an eyebrow, suppressing a chuckle. "Oh yeah? Let's see it, ghost hunter." Suzi rolled her eyes but shoved the phone into his hands. "I'm serious, Cole. Just look at it first, then you can laugh." Cole held her phone up, examining the screen. The image showed the corner of their backyard, a familiar spot framed by trees and a patch of flower beds that their mum had carefully cultivated over the years. But in the upper right corner, where the garden wall curved away into shadow, there was a faint outline, a suggestion of a shape that seemed out of place. It wasn't immediately obvious, but as he looked closer, Cole could make out a silhouette, faint yet unmistakable. The figure was blurred, almost as if it were half-faded, blending into the shadows, but there was just enough shape to give the impression of a person standing there. "Whoa," he breathed, a chill running down his spine. He tilted the phone, squinting, trying to catch every detail. The figure had no discernible features, just an eerie outline, but it was clear enough to raise the hairs on his arms. Suzi watched him closely, her expression triumphant. "See? I told you it was real." Cole nodded slowly, still studying the image. "It does look weird. You didn't edit this, right?" Her face twisted into a mixture of offense and exasperation. "Of course not. What kind of investigator do you think I am?" He chuckled, handing her phone back. "All right, fair enough, but let's be logical about it, yeah? What could it be other than a ghost?" Suzi sighed but nodded, leaning against the wall as she considered his question. "Well, I took the picture right before sunset, so there wasn't a lot of light. Maybe it was some weird trick with shadows. You know how they shift around that time." Cole tilted his head, thoughtful. "Maybe, but it doesn't look like a shadow from any tree or bush in the yard. It's too clear, too human." "Exactly!" Suzi's face brightened. "That's what I thought, too. I've gone over every possibility, Cole. I even checked the reflection from the windows in case it was some kind of glare." They moved to sit on his bed, phones and notebooks in hand, just like they had during countless late-night talks about ghost sightings and urban legends. For as long as he could remember, Suzi had been the one who believed in the unexplainable, the one who would spend hours researching a supposed haunting or reading up on the history of a haunted building. Cole leaned back, his eyes drifting to the window, where the late afternoon sun cast a soft golden glow over the room. "All right, let's go over the facts. First, when exactly did you take the picture?" Suzi flipped through her phone, pulling up the timestamp. 6:47 p.m., she said, her voice thoughtful. "And I remember because I'd been watching this YouTube video about energy fields and how they can, like, capture spirits or something." 6:47, right at dusk, Cole murmured, looking thoughtful. "So there's a chance it could be some kind of lighting trick. But you're sure there wasn't anyone else around? No neighbours in the yard?" Suzi shook her head emphatically. "I was alone. Mum was inside and nobody else was around. I swear, Cole, it was just me, the camera, and—" Her voice trailed off, eyes widening with excitement. "And the ghost." Cole laughed softly, but he couldn't entirely brush off the chill that crept up his spine when he thought about that shadowy figure. "All right, let's rule out some other possibilities. Could it have been an animal? Maybe if an animal looked like a tall, blurry person," she replied dryly, crossing her arms. "Fair point," he conceded. "Okay then. What about reflections? Could it be a light reflecting off something metal in the yard? Maybe a garden tool?" Suzi shook her head, the gleam in her eyes unwavering. "I checked everything, Cole. Nothing in the yard would have given off that kind of shape or colour. It's not metal, and it's not a reflection." They sat in silence for a moment, Suzi's fingers absently tracing patterns on her notebook, while Cole stared at the image on her phone again, trying to reconcile the strange silhouette with logical explanations. He wanted to believe her. There was something genuinely unsettling about the image, yet he couldn't help but search for a logical answer. "All right," he said finally, leaning back and studying Suzi's excited face. "Let's say, for the sake of argument, that it is something paranormal, a ghost, or, I don't know, a spirit or whatever. Why do you think it showed up now? Susie's expression turned pensive, her excitement giving way to thoughtfulness. Maybe it's because I was looking for it. You know, kind of like Dr. Kobe was saying in class, about observing things in a new way, like maybe if you're open to seeing things, they're more likely to show up. Cole raised an eyebrow, surprised by her insight. That's actually pretty deep, Susie. She grinned, her usual energy returning. See? I'm not just some ghost-chasing kid. There's a method to my madness. Cole chuckled, shaking his head. Yeah, all right. But what's your next step then, Ms. Ghost Hunter? Susie thought for a moment, her gaze drifting back to the phone. I want to try and capture it again. If it's really there, maybe it'll show up in more photos, you know? And if I can capture more images, it'll be harder to dismiss as just a fluke. Cole nodded, impressed by her determination. Sounds like a plan, but be careful, all right? If you're right and it's something real, then we don't know what we're dealing with. Susie scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. Don't worry, Cole. I'm practically a professional at this point. Ghosts don't scare me. He laughed, watching as she hopped off his bed, energized and focused. She held up her phone, scrolling through her ghost-hunting apps and notes, her face alight with the thrill of a new mystery. Cole felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet pride mixed with affection. Susie might have been the younger sibling, but there was something about her relentless spirit, her refusal to settle for easy answers, that he couldn't help but admire. As she disappeared down the hall, her footsteps echoing through the house, Cole leaned back, his mind wandering back to the image. The silhouette was still imprinted in his mind, a strange, haunting presence that seemed to defy explanation. The idea of something beyond what they could see or understand lingered, like a whisper on the edge of his thoughts. He glanced over at the high-speed camera, still sitting on his desk, its lens glinting faintly in the fading light. A thrill ran through him as he thought of his own mysteries, of the worlds he'd glimpsed only in theory and imagination. There was a sense that something was building, that he and Susie were on the edge of discoveries that went far beyond ghost stories or legends. The air around him felt charged, alive with possibilities he hadn't yet dared to name. Maybe, he murmured to himself, a faint smile playing on his lips. Chapter 5. Cole's Initial Experiments. The house was quiet, settled into that soft stillness that came late in the evening when the world outside slowed to a murmur and the sky was painted in deep shades of indigo. Cole sat cross-legged on his bed, the high-speed camera resting in his lap, its weight solid and grounding in his hands. The camera's design was simple yet elegant, a piece of old technology that seemed to bridge the past and the present, with all its dials, switches and metallic glints catching the dim light of his bedside lamp. Cole's fingers traced the contours of the camera, learning each groove and edge, his touch gentle and reverent, as though he were handling something ancient and sacred. His mind was a mix of curiosity and awe, laced with a hint of excitement that had simmered ever since he'd first discovered the camera. The thought of uncovering the secrets his grandfather had left behind felt like unlocking a hidden part of his own world, a legacy passed down that he was only beginning to understand. Taking a breath, he lifted the camera to eye level, peering through the viewfinder. His bedroom came into sharp focus, a space filled with the remnants of his life so far, stacks of books on quantum mechanics and artificial intelligence, sketches and notebooks, and a cluttered desk with various half-finished projects. But through the lens, everything looked crisper, more defined, as though the camera itself lent a new level of clarity to the world. "All right, let's see what you can do," he murmured to himself, his voice barely more than a whisper. There was a quiet excitement thrumming beneath his skin, an energy he could feel in the very air around him. He adjusted the shutter speed, feeling the slight resistance of the dial under his fingertips. The camera whirred softly, almost as if it were breathing, alive in his hands. The sound was subtle, barely audible, but there was a rhythm to it, a gentle hum that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat, steady and calming. Focusing on the edge of his desk, he pressed the shutter button. The click echoed softly, followed by a faint whine as the camera processed the shot. Cole lowered the camera, glancing at the screen on the back to examine the image. The high-speed lens had captured the smallest details with an uncanny precision. The delicate threads fraying at the edge of his notebook, a faint smudge of ink he hadn't noticed before, even the slight shadow cast by a stray paperclip. "Not bad," he murmured, his lips curving into a faint smile. The camera's sensitivity was incredible, far beyond anything he'd worked with before. He turned the dial, adjusting the exposure, pushing the settings to their limits. He took another shot, then another, each image revealing something new, each moment frozen in time with an intensity that felt almost surreal. He zoomed in on his bookshelf, capturing the tiny specks of dust suspended in the air like stars against the dark spines of his books, each particle caught mid-drift, suspended as though time itself had paused to let him see them. As he continued tinkering, he noticed something unusual, a faint blip on the display screen, a flicker that seemed out of place. His brow furrowed, and he pressed the shutter again, this time aiming at the far corner of his room, where shadows pooled beneath his closet door. The blip appeared again, a tiny burst of light on the edge of the frame, there 1 second and gone the next. Cole adjusted the settings, watching as the camera's display continued to flicker with those odd flashes, like brief pulses of energy that he couldn't quite explain. He leaned closer, trying to decipher the source, but the blips were inconsistent, erratic, as though they had a life of their own. "Must be a glitch," he muttered, frowning as he turned the camera over, inspecting it for signs of wear or damage. But the camera seemed flawless, its parts perfectly intact, each component fitting together with a precision that defied its age. He adjusted the settings again, this time switching to a slower shutter speed. The blips faded, but there was still a faint hum that persisted, a gentle vibration that seemed to pulse through his fingertips, subtle yet unmistakable. It was as if the camera was responding to something beyond his control, an energy that he couldn't quite identify. With a shrug, he chalked it up to the modifications his grandfather had made. "Probably just old wiring," he murmured, though a part of him wasn't entirely convinced. He lifted the camera again, this time aiming it toward the window. The sky outside was dark, the stars scattered across the night like pinpricks of light against the vast expanse. He focused the lens, capturing the faint glow of streetlights below, the soft outlines of leaves rustling in the evening breeze. The camera clicked, capturing each detail with a sharpness that seemed almost magical. Lowering the camera, he looked at the image. The streetlights glowed, each bulb a tiny beacon in the darkness, but there was something else, an almost imperceptible shimmer along the edge of the frame. A delicate, translucent haze that seemed to dance at the edge of his vision. He blinked, and it was gone, leaving him wondering if he'd imagined it. A soft laugh escaped him, a mixture of wonder and disbelief. The camera was unlike anything he'd encountered, each image revealing layers of detail that felt too precise, too intricate to be mere coincidence. It was as if the camera itself had a mind, a purpose, capturing not just moments but something deeper, something hidden within the ordinary. He shifted on the bed, leaning back against the headboard as he continued to experiment, adjusting the focus, the exposure, the frame. Hours slipped by unnoticed, the world outside fading into darkness as he lost himself in the rhythm of the camera, each click of the shutter a heartbeat, steady and constant. There was a strange comfort in the repetition, a sense of connection that went beyond the technical. It was as though he were sharing a conversation with his grandfather, the camera a bridge that spanned time and memory, linking them across the silence. Each adjustment, Each flash of light felt like a language, one he was only beginning to understand. As he shifted the camera for another shot, the blue light flickered on again, pulsing softly along the viewfinder. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the shutter. The light was faint, barely visible, but it felt intentional, as though the camera itself were trying to communicate something, urging him to look closer, to pay attention. Intrigued, he aimed at the corner of his desk again, watching as the light intensified, a soft glow that seemed to radiate from the camera, casting faint halo over the edge of the frame. He pressed the shutter, and for a split second he thought he saw something, a faint outline, a shadow that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Cole pulled the camera away, staring at it with a mixture of fascination and unease. There was something strange about the way it reacted, as if it were responding to an unseen presence, capturing fragments of a world just beyond his reach. The thought sent a thrill down his spine, a mixture of fear and excitement that left him breathless. Shaking his head, he laughed softly, trying to brush off the feeling. "You're losing it, Cole," he muttered to himself. But as he looked down at the camera, its metallic surface gleaming in the soft light, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding something extraordinary, something alive. He reached over to his desk, grabbing his notebook, his fingers moving quickly as he jotted down notes, recording each setting, each adjustment, trying to capture the details of his experiment. His handwriting was messy, looping and uneven, a testament to the rush of ideas that flooded his mind, each one more compelling than the last. When he finally set the notebook aside, he realized how late it was, the clock on his wall ticking past midnight. The room was bathed in shadows, the only light coming from his bedside lamp, casting a soft, warm glow over the camera. Cole leaned back, exhaustion settling over him, but his mind was still racing, his thoughts alive with possibilities. He set the camera gently on his nightstand, his fingers lingering on the edge, reluctant to let it go, as though it held answers he hadn't yet discovered. As he lay back, staring up at the ceiling, the faint hum of the camera echoed in his mind, a quiet promise of mysteries waiting to be revealed. Chapter 6. First Contact with Mick. Cole sat cross-legged on his bed, the high-speed camera cradled in his lap, fingers hovering over the settings dial as he cycled through the options. His room was dimly lit, the warm glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows that stretched across the walls, adding to the quiet sense of mystery that hung in the air. He'd been experimenting with the camera for hours, feeling the same thrill each time he discovered something new. The camera seemed to hold endless possibilities, each click and setting revealing hidden depths, like unlocking pieces of a puzzle only he could see. As he flicked the dial to a new setting, a faint whirring sound emerged from the camera, a subtle vibration that pulsed in his hands. The viewfinder's edge glowed faintly blue, a soft halo around the lens that caught his eye. Intrigued, he lifted the camera and peered through the viewfinder. His room came into sharp focus, each detail outlined with an almost supernatural clarity. But something felt different. The air around him seemed charged, an electric hum that prickled along his skin. "Hello?" he muttered, feeling foolish as the word left his mouth. To his surprise, the camera emitted a faint beep, as if acknowledging him. He blinked, half expecting nothing, but a quiet crackle echoed in his ears, like the static of an old radio, before a soft, hesitant voice answered. Hello?" Cole froze, his heart hammering as he held the camera tighter, trying to make sense of what he'd just heard. The voice was faint, distant, yet unmistakably real. A girl's voice, sounding as startled as he felt. Can you hear me?" he ventured, his voice barely more than a whisper. There was a pause, then the voice returned, clearer this time. "Yes, I can hear you. How are you doing that?" He swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. He shifted the camera slightly, adjusting the focus, his mind racing to grasp what was happening. The girl's voice held a tone of curiosity mixed with hesitation, mirroring his own confusion. "I have no idea," he admitted, his voice shaky. "I was just messing around with this camera. Are you using one too?" Another pause, and then a faint, incredulous laugh. "A camera? Yeah, I am. Wait, where are you?" Cole felt a strange thrill at the question, the mystery deepening. "In my room," he replied, glancing around as though to confirm. "I'm at home. You?" "Same," she said, her tone softening as the initial surprise faded. "I'm actually not sure what's going on. One minute I was adjusting the settings and then I heard you. Do you have a name?" "Cole," he said, feeling an odd formality in introducing himself this way. "I'm Cole. And you?" "Mick," she replied, her voice a little steadier now. "This is weird, right?" "Weird doesn't even begin to cover it," Cole admitted, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The surreal nature of the conversation was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, yet it felt strangely normal to speak to her, as if they were two people meeting through a mutual connection neither fully understood. They fell into a tentative silence, each absorbing the surreal nature of their situation. He lowered the camera slightly, looking down at it with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The viewfinder continued to pulse faintly, the blue light glowing like a beacon, bridging a connection he couldn't explain. "So," Mick's voice broke through his thoughts, tentative yet curious. "Do you, mess around with cameras a lot?" He chuckled, surprised by the mundane nature of the question given the circumstances. "Not really, this one's, well, it was my grandpa's. I just got it a few days ago, and I've been trying to figure out how it works." "Oh, that's cool." Her voice softened, and he sensed a kind of empathy, a shared understanding of something left unspoken. "My family, they kind of pass things down too. Not like this, though." Cole nodded, though she couldn't see it, an odd comfort settling over him. The idea of speaking to someone completely unknown was jarring yet liberating, as if he could share pieces of himself without the usual barriers. "So," he said, hoping to ease the strangeness with casual conversation, "you're a tech person too?" Mick hesitated. "Kind of. I like experimenting with things, you know? Figuring out how stuff works. But nothing like this. I'm pretty sure this is way beyond the usual." He laughed softly. "Yeah, I'd say so. This is probably the strangest thing I've ever done, and that's saying something." She laughed too, a bright sound that felt oddly reassuring. "So, any ideas on what's happening here, Mr. Science Guy?" Cole smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through him at her easy humour. "Not a clue. I'm as in the dark as you are. But, this is kind of amazing, isn't it?" "Definitely amazing," she agreed, a note of awe in her voice. Maybe we're just supposed to figure it out as we go." They talked, the conversation flowing in fits and starts, each new revelation punctuated by awkward pauses as they adjusted to this strange connection. Mick's voice was steady, yet occasionally dipped into wonder, her tone matching his own sense of disbelief. They asked each other simple questions, small details about their lives that felt more profound given the surreal nature of their meeting. Just as he was about to ask another question, a faint beep sounded from the camera. Surprised, he glanced down, noticing a blinking icon in the corner of the display, a small, unfamiliar symbol resembling a download prompt. Intrigued, he tapped on the icon, and within moments his phone vibrated with a notification. "It's downloading something," he said, half to himself, half to Mick. "Mine too," she replied, her tone laced with both excitement and caution. Some kind of app? Do you think we could keep talking with it? He opened his phone, watching as an app with a simple blank icon installed itself. Without thinking twice, he tapped to open it, and a new screen appeared. Empty, with a single blinking cursor in a message box at the bottom. The interface was simple, almost rudimentary, but functional. Mick's message popped up almost immediately. Testing. Did it work? Cole grinned, his fingers flying across the screen as he typed back. Looks like it. This is insane, she replied, her message popping up within seconds. It's like we're texting, but with a high-speed camera. Honestly, I'm not even going to try to make sense of it right now, he typed back, chuckling. This is way beyond anything I've ever seen. Same. So, Cole, what's your story? He hesitated, surprised by the question. There was something refreshingly direct about Mick, a candidness that made him feel like he could say anything, share anything, without fear of judgment. He found himself telling her about his life in Tremble, about Dr. Kobe's class and his fascination with science, the words flowing as if he were speaking to an old friend. Her responses came quickly, filled with her own stories, tales of small-town adventures, experiments gone wrong, and her own wonder about the world. She had a curiosity that matched his, a love for the unknown that mirrored his own, and he felt a strange connection to her, as if they were kindred spirits brought together by an impossible twist of fate. They talked for hours, losing track of time as they shared bits of themselves, their messages filling the empty spaces in the app like pieces of a puzzle they were both trying to understand. It was late when they finally signed off, their conversation ending with a simple promise to talk again soon. As he lay back in bed, staring at the faint glow of his phone screen, Cole couldn't help but feel that he'd stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that went beyond explanation. He closed his eyes, his thoughts drifting to Mick, to the mysterious connection that had brought them together, and for the first time, he wondered what secrets his grandfather's camera truly held. Chapter 7. The Charismatic Bully. The hallway at Tremble High was alive with the steady rush of students, the hum of voices blending into a low roar that filled the space like a river running through it. Lockers clanged open and shut, laughter echoed from clusters of friends, and the smell of faintly burned coffee drifted out from the teacher's lounge. Cole moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his shoulders slightly hunched as he manoeuvred his way toward his next class. But today, he felt a strange undercurrent, a slight tension in the air that he couldn't shake. And then he saw him. Brad Langston, leaning against a row of lockers, laughing with a small group of students gathered around him. He was tall, athletic, with sandy blonde hair that looked like it had never seen a bad day, and a smile that seemed both inviting and dangerous. There was a charisma about him, a confidence that drew people in, an energy that filled whatever room he entered. But to Cole, Brad was something else entirely, a storm that loomed on the horizon, unpredictable and quietly threatening. Brad's gaze shifted, landing on Cole, and for a split second his smile faded, his eyes narrowing just enough to send a subtle message. He was watching. "Cole! Hey, Cole!" Brad's voice rang out, casual yet pointed. It carried across the hallway, stopping Cole in his tracks. He could feel the eyes of Brad's friends on him, a mix of amusement and anticipation as they waited to see how the interaction would play out. Cole turned slowly, his expression calm, carefully neutral. He forced a small smile, trying not to let his unease show. "Hey, Brad." Brad pushed himself off the locker, his movements smooth, almost lazy as he sauntered over. His grin was all charm, but there was a sharpness in his eyes, a glint that Cole knew all too well. "Didn't see you at the game last Friday," Brad said, crossing his arms. "Missed out on a pretty good win." Cole shrugged. "Yeah, I had other plans." "Other plans, huh?" Brad's tone was light, friendly even, but there was an edge beneath it. Not sure what could be more important than supporting your team, Cole. Cole held his gaze, feeling the weight of the moment. Guess I'm not much of a sports guy. Brad's friends chuckled softly, a low murmur that felt more like a warning than a laugh. Brad's smile widened, but his eyes remained hard, calculating. "That's a shame," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "You know, some people might think you're avoiding school spirit. Not a good look, Cole." Cole clenched his jaw, feeling his pulse quicken, but he kept his face calm, refusing to let Brad see any hint of frustration. He knew Brad's tactics well enough, the subtle digs, the way he twisted his words to make every comment sound like a harmless joke. But the meaning was always clear, an invisible line drawn in the air between them. "Maybe next time," Cole replied, his tone steady. Brad's smile didn't falter, but something shifted in his gaze, a flicker of impatience, a flash of something darker. "Looking forward to it, Cole," he said, a hint of challenge in his voice. With a final glance, Brad turned back to his friends, his laughter echoing down the hall as he disappeared into the crowd. Cole let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease as Brad's presence faded. He didn't hate Brad. Not really. But there was a resentment there, a silent frustration that simmered beneath the surface every time they crossed paths. Cole continued down the hall, his thoughts swirling. He knew he should let it go, brush it off like he always did, but something about today's exchange felt heavier, like a weight pressing on him. Later that evening, after the usual quiet chaos of dinner, homework, and a brief chat with Suzi about her latest paranormal investigation, Cole settled in his room, reaching for the camera. It had become a ritual now. This time he spent experimenting with its settings, feeling the smooth click of each dial under his fingers, the weight of it steady in his hands. And tonight, it felt like an escape, a way to ground himself, to shake off the lingering tension from his run-in with Brad. He adjusted the settings, watching as the faint blue light around the viewfinder pulsed, a steady glow that felt oddly reassuring. He smiled to himself, thinking of Mick and their strange chance connection. Lifting the camera, he turned to a setting they'd discovered together, a shortcut to open the app that had somehow downloaded on his phone. As soon as the app loaded, a message popped up on his screen. "You around?" Cole grinned, typing back quickly. "Yeah, just had a run-in with my favourite person." "That bad, huh?" Mick replied almost instantly. "What happened?" He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure how to explain. But there was something easy about talking to Mick, a comfort that made him feel like he could share anything. So he told her about Brad, about the strange tension between them, how it was hard to pinpoint exactly when the tension had started, but how it had built up over the years, an unspoken rivalry that Brad seemed determined to keep alive. "He sounds like a real piece of work," Mick replied, her tone laced with a humour that softened the topic. "I've got one of those too, actually." Cole's curiosity piqued. "Really?" "Yeah," she typed back. "Her name's Maddie. She's like queen of the school. Everything she does is perfect, according to her anyway. She's always been on my case, especially when it comes to my projects. She'll find some way to criticize or fix things, you know? Like she thinks she knows better than anyone else." He could practically hear the frustration in her words, a shared tension that mirrored his own. He felt a strange sense of kinship with her, the realization that they both faced their own battles, each dealing with people who saw them as obstacles or rivals. "So what do you do about it?" he asked. There was a pause before her reply appeared on the screen. "Depends on the day. Sometimes I just ignore her, let her think whatever she wants. Other times, I don't know. I wish I could say I have a great solution, but sometimes it just feels like I'm stuck in a loop with her." Cole sighed. leaning back against his pillows, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. He knew that feeling all too well, the frustration of being caught in a cycle, the endless back and forth that seemed to have no end. "I get it," he replied. "Feels like no matter what I do, Brad's always going to find some reason to mess with me. It's like he's just waiting, you know?" "Exactly," Mick typed back. "Like they're waiting for you to mess up so they can pounce." Cole chuckled, a soft, bitter laugh. "Yeah. Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to just not care about what they think." "That's the dream," she replied, and he could almost imagine her smiling, sharing the same wistful thought. But hey, at least we're not alone, right? Cole felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of reassurance he hadn't expected. He typed back quickly, his fingers flying over the screen. "Yeah, we're in this together." The silence that followed was comfortable, a quiet pause that seemed to hold them together across the distance, as if they were sitting in the same room, sharing the same burdens. "Anyway," Mick typed suddenly, "thanks for listening, Cole. I know it's kind of a weird thing to talk about, but it helps." "Same here," he replied, his words simple but sincere. "I don't think I've ever talked about this with anyone. It's nice to know someone gets it." They fell into a steady rhythm, their conversation shifting between lighter topics, shared interests, and random jokes. Cole found himself smiling more than he had in a while, the lingering weight of the day's tension slipping away as he spoke with her. They shared stories of school, of strange encounters with classmates, of little moments that made them laugh, each message weaving a thread of connection between them. Hours later, as their conversation drew to a close, Cole felt a sense of contentment settle over him. There was something undeniably comforting about talking to Mick, something that made him feel understood, as if they were two pieces of a puzzle that fit perfectly, even across the distance. As he set his phone aside, he found himself reflecting on their shared experience, the strange bond that had formed between them through their mutual struggles. And for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to face Brad's animosity alone. Chapter 8. Hints of Dimension. The soft glow of Cole's phone screen illuminated his face as he leaned back against his headboard, the steady hum of nighttime silence filling his room. He scrolled through the app where Mick's latest message waited, a small notification flashing on the screen. Ever since they had connected through the camera, each conversation felt like stepping into a secret world, a shared corner of their lives where nothing seemed impossible. Tonight, Mick had started talking about her latest experiment. She often rambled about her projects, and Cole found her enthusiasm contagious, her descriptions vivid enough to make him feel like he was right there, watching her as she worked. "Working on a new way to purify air," her message read. "Got some machines set up that should pull the necessary stuff out of the atmosphere, rearrange it, and give us clean, pure air." Cole stared at the message, blinking. He reread it, trying to make sense of her words. He thought of the air purifiers his mum used sometimes, those simple devices that filtered dust and allergens out of the air. But Mick's description sounded far more complex, almost like a science fiction invention. "Wait, how does that even work?" He typed back, his fingers moving slowly, trying to wrap his head around what she was describing. "You're saying you have a machine that literally pulls things out of the air?" "Yep," came her reply almost instantly, followed by a cheerful emoji. "Pretty standard tech here. Nothing fancy, really. But it gets the job done." "Standard tech? Nothing fancy?" Cole's eyebrows knitted together as he read her words. He tapped his fingers against the edge of his phone, pondering her response. Most air purification systems on Earth were still pretty basic, relying on filters or ionizers to clear pollutants. But Mick was talking about something that sounded far more advanced, something he couldn't quite picture fitting into any technology he'd ever seen. "So it's not like A typical air purifier, then? He asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Oh, no, Mick replied, her words laced with amusement. We don't use those old purifiers anymore. We upgraded to these machines that can actually extract elements from the atmosphere. We just pull the stuff we need, break down the rest and get clean air. It's way more efficient. Cole felt his heartbeat quicken, a faint, inexplicable thrill racing through him. He couldn't tell if it was excitement or curiosity, or both. Mick's tone was so casual, so matter-of-fact, as though she were describing something as simple as turning on a light switch. But to him, it sounded like something out of a futuristic science journal, a glimpse of a world that seemed impossibly advanced. What other kinds of tech do you have? He typed, unable to contain his curiosity any longer. He waited, his fingers hovering over the screen, his mind racing with possibilities. Oh, we have a lot of different things, she replied. Like our fabricators. They're amazing, honestly. If you need something, like clothes, food, tools, you just program it, and the machine pulls everything it needs from the environment. It can make almost anything in a matter of minutes. Cole's eyes widened. A machine that could create anything, pulling elements from the environment and rearranging them into something entirely new. It sounded like something straight out of science fiction, like the replicators he'd seen in old sci-fi movies. He tried to imagine it, picturing a device that could synthesize an entire meal or an outfit on demand, and the image felt both thrilling and impossible. Wow, he replied finally, feeling as though he'd stumbled onto a treasure trove of secrets. That sounds incredible. I've never heard of anything like that. Really? She typed back, a hint of surprise evident in her response. It's pretty normal here. Most of us have one at home, saves time, and it's eco-friendly. We don't waste anything. Cole bit his lip, a dozen questions swirling in his mind. Where exactly was here for Mick? He'd always assumed she was from a town similar to Tremble, maybe a neighbouring city with a slightly different culture. But the way she described her world, the casual mention of these technologies that didn't exist anywhere he'd heard of, left him feeling a strange sense of displacement, as if he'd glimpsed a world that defied everything he understood. But he kept his thoughts to himself. He didn't want to push too hard, didn't want to shatter the fragile connection they'd built. Instead, he chose his next words carefully. So? If everyone has this stuff, does that mean you don't go shopping or anything? He asked, hoping to understand her world without giving away his confusion. Shopping? Mick replied, followed by a laughing emoji. Not really. We don't have stores here like I've heard about in other places. Why waste time buying things when you can just make them yourself? Clothes, food, whatever we need, it's all right there. Cole's fingers hovered over the keyboard, his mind racing as he tried to reconcile her words with his own reality. No stores. A world where people created everything they needed on demand, without currency or commerce. It was like she lived in a place untouched by the demands of society, a place that operated on entirely different rules. But don't people need jobs to get what they want, like to pay for stuff? He typed, struggling to keep his tone light, as though he were just making conversation. Jobs? Mick's response came after a moment's pause, and he could almost feel her puzzlement. Well, we have work, I guess, but it's not really like how you're describing it. Everyone just does what they're good at. And we share. No one has to go without anything. It's just how things work here. Cole sat back, absorbing her words, feeling a mix of awe and bewilderment. The more she spoke, the more he felt like he was peering into a parallel world, a place that defied every rule he knew. But Mick's tone was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that it left him wondering if maybe he was the one who was missing something. He wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but a part of him hesitated. If he pushed too hard, if he let on that her world seemed strange to him, he might shatter the delicate balance they'd found, the easy trust that had blossomed between them. Instead, he took a deep breath, deciding to let her words sit for a while, to turn them over in his mind and let them settle. "Sounds like a pretty interesting place," he replied finally, his tone carefully neutral. "It is," Mick replied, a warmth evident in her words. "Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to live somewhere else, though. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my home, but it'd be fun to see what life is like for other people, in other places." Cole's mind buzzed with unasked questions, with a burning curiosity that left him feeling both exhilarated and uncertain. But he kept his tone light, matching her easy enthusiasm. "Maybe one day you'll get to visit," he typed, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You never know where life will take you." She sent back a smiling emoji, followed by a simple message that read, "Maybe one day we'll both get to see each other's worlds." Cole's heart skipped a beat, a strange thrill running through him at the thought. He had no idea what that would even look like, what it would mean to see her world with his own eyes. But the thought lingered, a tantalizing possibility that sent his mind spiraling into 1,000 what-ifs. As their conversation continued, the hints of her world lingered in his mind like fragments of a dream. Fleeting images of a place where people lived without need, where machines provided for every want and eliminated waste, a place that felt both alien and impossibly beautiful. When they finally said goodnight, Cole set his phone down, his thoughts heavy with questions. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the darkness filled with the images Mick had painted with her words. Her world felt like something out of a novel, a place so distant yet so real that he could almost touch it. As he lay there, his mind drifted back to Dr. Kobe's words about parallel worlds, about places existing side by side, yet separated by boundaries they couldn't see or understand. It was a fanciful thought, one he'd never taken seriously. But now, with Mick's words echoing in his mind, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was a sliver of truth to it. A faint chill ran down his spine, and he pulled the covers tighter around him, his heart racing with the thrill of possibility. The mysteries of Mick's world hovered just beyond his reach, like a horizon he could never quite touch. But the pull was undeniable, a call he couldn't ignore, and as he drifted off to sleep, he knew he'd spend every moment trying to bridge the gap between them, to uncover the truth hidden in her words. Chapter 9. Ghost Hunting Enthusiasm. The night air was thick and cool, wrapping around Cole as he stood in the middle of the backyard, glancing uneasily at the darkened edge of the trees. His breath curled in small clouds around him, visible in the glow of his sister Suzi's flashlight, which swept through the shadows with slow, calculated movements. She was crouched on the ground, examining the faint markings she had chalked into the dirt, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Suzi had insisted on this ghost hunt for days, ever since she'd caught that strange, shadowy figure on her phone. To her, it had been a calling, proof that the other side was reaching out. She had pored over every paranormal blog and ghost hunting forum she could find, reading late into the night, taking notes and sketching out her plans in the margins of her notebook. And now, tonight, she had finally convinced Cole to join her in what she described as the ultimate investigation. Cole shivered, pulling his jacket tighter around himself as he looked around. The yard felt different at night, the trees casting twisted shadows, the leaves rustling with an eerie rhythm that seemed to echo through the darkness. A thick mist had started to settle, rolling in from the fields beyond, creeping through the grass in ghostly tendrils. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low, hesitant. Suzi looked up, her face lit with an expression that was equal parts determination and excitement. She held the flashlight under her chin, casting her features in dramatic shadows that only emphasized her uncontainable enthusiasm. "Of course I'm sure," she replied, her tone unshakable. "This is our chance, Cole. This is the night we make contact." Cole stifled a sigh, giving her a skeptical look. You know, normal people don't go around looking for ghosts. She shot him a glare, her eyes narrowing as she waved the flashlight in his direction. We're not normal people. Besides, I saw something last time, and I'm not letting this chance slip away. Don't you want to know if there's more out there? He hesitated, caught by the question. He'd always been curious, fascinated by the unknown, but this was different. His rational mind struggled with the idea, the scientist in him wanting to dismiss it. But a part of him, an unexpected part, felt the tug of curiosity, the thrill of what-ifs that lingered just out of reach. Fine, he relented, holding up his hands in surrender. But if I get haunted because of this, it's on you. Suzi grinned, her excitement bubbling over as she pulled out her phone and checked her ghost hunting apps, one hand clutched tightly around a small EMF reed. The device beeped faintly in her hand, the screen lighting up with a series of faint green and yellow bars. See? She whispered, showing him the screen. The EMF is picking up something. It's weak, but it's there. Cole glanced at the device, unable to hide his skepticism. Couldn't it just be the house's wiring or something? Suzi waved him off, her eyes sparkling with determination. I thought of that already, genius. I checked the house's EMF levels, and they're nowhere near this high. There's something out here, Cole, something real. He sighed, but a tiny thrill tugged at him despite himself. He watched her as she crept toward the tree line, her movements slow, deliberate, as if she were hunting something unseen. Her focus was unwavering, her face lit by the dim glow of her phone screen and the faint moonlight filtering through the trees. He'd never seen her so engrossed, so utterly certain, and it was hard not to get caught up in her enthusiasm. As they approached the edge of the yard, a sudden chill seemed to settle over them, a heaviness in the air that made Cole's skin prickle. He glanced around, his gaze sweeping through the mist that clung to the ground like a ghostly veil. The silence was palpable, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the faint, distant hoot of an owl. "Do you feel that?" Suzi whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Cole nodded, feeling a strange weight pressing down on him, a sensation that was equal parts fear and fascination. Yeah, it feels different. Suzi's hand tightened around the EMF reader as she held it out in front of her, the screen flickering with faint pulses of light. She took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the trees, her expression one of pure concentration. "This is where they are," she murmured, almost to herself. "The other side. It's right here. We just have to reach it." Cole swallowed, glancing uneasily at the shadows that seemed to deepen around them. The idea of the other side felt abstract, distant, something he'd only ever heard about in ghost stories. But here, in the stillness of the night, with the cold seeping into his skin and the fog curling around his feet, it felt almost tangible, as though he could reach out and touch it. Suzi raised her phone, snapping a few pictures as she swept the flashlight through the trees, her breath steady, her focus unbroken. She lowered the phone to examine the images, her eyes scanning each one with an intensity that made Cole feel like he was intruding on something sacred. "Look," she whispered, her voice tight with barely contained excitement. She held the phone out to him, her hand trembling slightly as he took it. He squinted at the screen, trying to make out the details in the dim light. The first few pictures showed nothing but mist and trees, shadows layered over one another in hazy silhouettes. But in the last image, faint and barely visible, there was a shape, a blurred, translucent outline hovering just beyond the tree line. Cole's heart skipped a beat as he stared at the image, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but there was no mistaking the figure. A tall, elongated shadow, as if someone were standing just out of sight, watching them through the veil of mist. "Do you see it?" Susie's voice was filled with wonder, her eyes wide as she looked at him, her expression a mix of excitement and fear. He nodded slowly, feeling a shiver run down his spine. Yeah, I see it. They stood in silence, the image burning into his mind, the realization settling over him like a weight. He didn't know what he believed, didn't know if he was ready to accept the idea of another realm, another side. But here, in the quiet darkness, with the figure looming just beyond reach, he couldn't deny the feeling, the sense that something lay hidden in the shadows, something just out of sight. Suzi lowered her phone, her face lit by a quiet determination. The other side, she murmured, almost to herself. I knew it was real. I knew it. Cole glanced at her, feeling a strange mixture of pride and unease. She'd been searching for proof for as long as he could remember, chasing the invisible threads that connected their world to something beyond. And now, standing here in the cold, surrounded by shadows and mist, he felt like they'd found it, like they'd stumbled upon a doorway to a world he couldn't fully understand. Do you think it's a ghost? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Susie's gaze softened, her expression turning thoughtful as she looked out at the trees. Maybe. Or maybe it's something else, something we can't explain. She paused, her eyes distant, as though she were peering through the veil, reaching for answers hidden in the darkness. I think there's more out there, Cole. A whole realm we can't see. Maybe that's where the ghosts live, where they go when they leave this world. Cole shivered, the idea settling over him like a chill. He tried to imagine it, a realm beyond their own, a place where the dead lingered, watching, waiting. The thought filled him with a strange sense of wonder, a feeling that was both thrilling and terrifying. As they turned to head back toward the house, the faint outline of the figure remained etched in his mind, a ghostly imprint that lingered even as the night closed in around them. He glanced back once, half expecting to see it again, but the shadows had returned to their quiet stillness, the figure fading into memory. Suzi walked beside him, her expression serene, her eyes still alight with the thrill of discovery. For her, this was proof, a confirmation of everything she'd believed. But for Cole, it was something else, a glimpse into a mystery he couldn't yet name. A door cracked open just enough to make him wonder what lay beyond. As they reached the house, Cole cast one last look over his shoulder, his gaze lingering on the dark edge of the yard where the mist curled and shifted like a living thing. He didn't know if he'd ever see that figure again, didn't know if he was ready to confront whatever truth lay hidden in the shadows. But as he stepped into the warmth of the house, he felt a quiet thrill, a sense of anticipation that left him feeling both unsettled and alive. Chapter 10. A Growing Suspicion. Cole lay on his bed, his fingers hovering over his phone screen as he reread the last message from Mick. A familiar thrill of curiosity buzzed through him, mixed with something deeper, a faint tugging sensation that had begun to gnaw at the edges of his thoughts. There was something unusual about his conversations with Mick, something he couldn't quite define, but that kept pulling him back, like the answer to a question that lingered just out of reach. The screen blinked as a new message from her popped up. Hey, you still there? He typed back quickly. Yeah, sorry, just spaced out for a second. Good, she replied, adding a smiling emoji. Guess I was just thinking about the other night. Something spooky happened in my yard. Cole's fingers stilled. His eyes narrowed slightly as he read her words, feeling a faint prickle at the back of his neck. Spooky? He replied, his curiosity piqued. What happened? There was a slight pause before her response came through, almost as if she were gathering her thoughts. Well, I was in my yard just taking some pictures, kind of like I always do when I'm bored, but I swear I saw something strange, like two silhouettes standing near the edge of my property. Cole felt his heart beat faster. His mind flashed back to his own backyard, to the cold mist curling around him and Suzi as they ventured into the shadows, looking for proof of the paranormal. The same night, the same haunting mist, the faint shadow they'd captured on Suzi's phone. Could it really be a coincidence? That's weird, he typed slowly, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of her words. Were they just shadows, or did they look like actual people? Hard to say, Mick replied, her tone thoughtful. They were faint, almost like they were part of the fog, but definitely shaped like people. I thought maybe it was just a trick of the light, but it felt different, like they were watching. Cole's breath caught, a shiver running down his spine. Her words felt like an echo of his own thoughts from that night, a mirror to his own experiences. The possibility that they had seen each other, each separated by a strange, invisible divide, left him feeling a mixture of excitement and unease. He wanted to ask more, to push her for details, but something held him back, a quiet voice urging him not to delve too deeply, at least not yet. Sounds like you've got some ghosts of your own, he replied, trying to keep his tone light, even as his mind continued to spin with questions. Maybe you're the haunted one. Mick sent back a laughing emoji, followed by, maybe we're both haunted. That would explain a lot. They fell into an easy rhythm again, switching to lighter topics, each question slowly peeling back new layers of her world. But beneath the surface, Cole's mind churned, analysing every detail she shared, every casual description that hinted at a life that felt increasingly distant from his own. So, he typed, trying to sound as casual as possible. What's it like where you live? You've got all this cool tech and everything. What else is different? She responded quickly, as though she'd been waiting for him to ask. It's peaceful. Kind of quiet, really. Everyone knows each other, and we don't really have big cities or anything like that. There are places where people meet up, but it's not like shopping malls or restaurants. More like gathering spots. Cole frowned. The picture she painted was starkly different from the bustling town of Tremble, with its cafes, corner stores, and constant activity. Gathering spots. He tried to picture it, but her words conjured images that felt foreign, surreal. Sounds nice, he replied, hoping she couldn't sense the hesitation in his words. So no cities, no shops. Not really, she answered, a hint of pride in her tone. Everyone here is self-sufficient, We can create most of what we need with the machines we have. It's just simpler that way. Cole's mind reeled as he tried to make sense of her description. How could a place exist without cities, without stores or markets? It sounded almost utopian, a world where people lived without the noise and clutter of everyday life, where everything they needed was simply there. But it also felt impossibly distant, like a dream he could only half understand. Sounds like your town is different from mine, he replied, his fingers moving slowly over the screen. Probably, she answered, her tone light. What about yours? What's Tremble like? Cole thought for a moment, trying to describe his world in a way that might make sense to her. It's busy, he typed finally. We have a lot of people here, lots of shops, restaurants, and everyone's always going somewhere. I guess it's kind of loud, but I'm used to it. It's home, Mick's reply came after a slight pause, her words thoughtful. I don't think I've ever been anywhere like that. It sounds exciting, though. So many things to see and do. Cole found himself smiling at her words, a strange warmth filling his chest. Her curiosity felt genuine, her interest in his world mirroring his own fascination with hers. The thought that they could be so different yet connected through these conversations left him feeling a sense of kinship, a bond that transcended the strange barriers that separated them. Maybe one day you'll get to see it, he typed, half joking, though a part of him wondered if there was a way, some bridge that could connect their worlds. Maybe, she replied, a hint of wistfulness in her tone. That would be pretty incredible. They continued talking, delving into little details of their lives, each story revealing new aspects of who they were. Cole shared memories of summers spent at the Tremble Fair, late-night movies with Suzi, and afternoons at the library, losing himself in books about the mysteries of the universe. Mick, in turn, told him about quiet evenings in her neighbourhood, long walks under a sky filled with stars, the thrill of discovery when she tinkered with her machines and managed to create something new. As the night wore on, Cole felt the weight of sleep pressing down on him, but he didn't want to stop. He found himself drawn deeper into their conversation, each word, each shared memory, weaving a thread that bound them together, creating a connection that felt more real than anything he'd ever known. Eventually, their messages slowed, both of them winding down as the hours crept into early morning. "I should probably go," he typed reluctantly, glancing at the clock. "But this was really nice, talking to you." "Same," she replied, a warmth in her words that he could feel even through the screen. "It's like, I don't know, like I've known you forever." Cole's heart skipped a beat, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, same here." They said their good nights, and as he set his phone down, he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. But beneath the comfort, a thread of curiosity remained, pulling at his mind, urging him to dig deeper, to uncover the truth that lay hidden in their conversations. Rolling onto his back, he stared up at the ceiling, his thoughts drifting back to Mick's words, the silhouettes in her yard, the strange technology, the way her world seemed to exist in a place he couldn't quite reach. He thought of Dr. Kobe's lectures on parallel dimensions, the theory that worlds could exist side by side, unseen but close enough to touch. Could it be possible? The idea left him breathless, a thrill of excitement and fear running through him. The mysteries of Mick's world lingered in his mind, like the echo of a distant song, drawing him deeper into a question that had no answer. And as he closed his eyes, drifting into the quiet darkness, he knew one thing for certain. He would find a way to bridge the divide between them, no matter where it led him.